Welcome to episode number 90 of the LSR Podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by the brightest minds in all the gaming industry. I have with me Adam Candee. I have Dustin Gouker. If you'd like to follow those guys on the Twitter machine, and I suggest you do, at Adam Candee, that is 2 E's, no Y, at Dustin Gouker. And if you really, really want to have one account that you hate follow, at Matt Brown M2 if you want to follow me. We are on all the Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, all the places that you get podcasts. So go in, subscribe, rate, and review. Really do appreciate that. And plus, it just gets automatically delivered to you every single time we post one of these, so you don't have to go find it on the site. This week, of course, there will be talk about the big game from this past week and those numbers that are attached to the big game, and some things that may or may not have happened during the big game that allowed for some of these books to maybe not get as much of those numbers that they could have gotten. We'll talk a deal between PointsBet and the NHL. We'll talk about Wynn and a few state updates as well. But let's go ahead, Dustin, let's kick things off here with the Super Bowl. This was, we expected this to be big numbers. This was the first Super Bowl with just, a ton of jurisdictions open here, and some of these starting to at least mature a little bit as well. And the numbers so far have not disappointed.
Yeah, top line number. It's we don't always get reporting very quickly out of all these states, but for the Super Bowl, everybody was anxious to get their numbers out. So we have states reporting all over the place. We in states that have reported, we have already over $430 million wagered on the Super Bowl, according to official numbers from all these states. If we loop in the states that have not reported, we're pushing half a billion for sure. That's up from 262 million that we know was bet in the last Super Bowl in 2020. So definitely a big top line numbers. The biggest one, Nevada, still the king, 136 million. New Jersey, I think, surprised us with how much was bet based on historical performance there. They had about 117 million bet. So yeah, and then a lot of states that were new, like Colorado and Tennessee. These are states that having online sports betting for first time did very well too. So not shocking. This is the biggest betting event of the year, but we're seeing some big top level numbers coming out from all of these states.
Yeah, Adam, I mean, I think, typically each year March Madness actually, does more handle collectively than the Super Bowl does. But in this weird year, it seems like, we saw college football, the interest in that went down as well because of the weird season. I'm wondering if we see a pretty sharp decline in the numbers for March Madness as well, just because of the weird year, because of all the postponements, because of everything that's going on in the world right now. The Super Bowl might actually reign supreme this year.
It's entirely possible that it does, because we don't lose the cultural relevance of the Super Bowl no matter what else is going on, right? And we know that with March Madness that we're used to having it spread out all over the country. So you have a number of different communities that are feeling the impact of that, right? It's being reported on the local news. People know what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't have that. And you're not going to have local gatherings in the same way that you would. That said, I think the one effect that does stay in place that's similar to the Super Bowl is that you have far more captive audiences. You have folks who are going to be paying a lot more attention, who are going to be bombarded with the advertising that we know that they're seeing in new states to sign up for sports betting that they might not have had when it comes to March Madness in the past, Super Bowl in the past, etc. So it'll be interesting to see how that effect works out with the NCAA tournament taking place only in one spot in Indiana.
And Dustin, one of the things that we saw throughout the course of the game as well is not one, but two different DraftKings commercials that went live during the game, actually pushing people to a free-to-play contest that was a fourth quarter only free-to-play contest. And, this is, we thought it was like a DFS deal, but if you go, like, you could sign up to this through the sportsbook. It was kind of a generic commercial, just said DraftKings kind of the way it was. It wasn't really DraftKings Sportsbook, wasn't really DraftKings DFS. It just was branding it as just DraftKings. And then the pool itself, was, I can only assume from what they're going to see, it was just a massive success. When I looked before the game started, there was over 700,000 people in it. So I can, whatever the commercial may have added to that, I didn't actually go back in and check. But here we are with DraftKings running two commercials during the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and this is, Super Bowl, a lot of people who follow the NFL probably know the DraftKings name. Even the Super Bowl, you expand that. So, it's probably money well spent. You get people trying out the product, being a little bit more aware of it, what DraftKings is and what they do. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays long term, and how lots of companies get a bump out of the Super Bowl commercials. We'll see if that's the case. Super Bowl was not one of your artsy commercials that's trying to get some virality out of it. It's just it was going to the contest. So yeah, but DraftKings, they were also down a little bit before the game. There was a commercial before the game, and people were going there and probably couldn't get on the site. So it was good to see that they worked that out by the time the big commercials during the real game got worked out.
Yeah, Adam, that leads us to our next topic here, which is, if there was one day that maybe you would not want your tech to fail you, it would probably be on the Super Bowl, the day of the biggest single football game of the year, the day that everybody is at home, the day that everybody's in front of the television, the day that everybody's in front of a computer or on their phone making a bet on the game. And unfortunately, we saw a ton of different outages across the industry. This was not just on one company. It was everything ranging from here in Nevada to everywhere else in the country as well.
Laryngitis when you're supposed to sing the national anthem. Horrible acne for your prom date. Like, these are all of the things that are comparable to sportsbooks having trouble on Super Bowl Sunday of all days. And as you mentioned, Matt, it's not like it happened in one or two places. We counted close to a half dozen sportsbooks that had some sort of issue in terms of having an outage prior to the Super Bowl. One sportsbook here in Nevada not only had issues before the Super Bowl, but during the Super Bowl as well. I think I mentioned to you that I was going in trying to hedge out of some of my awful Kansas City bets, and that particular sportsbook told me I had a $0 balance, which was very interesting because I'm bad, but I'm not that bad. So what we found out was that a number of the issues were coming from a back-end provider, Candee, who a lot of folks in the industry know. They had about a 30-minute outage, downtime that they blamed on one particular betting market that they would not elaborate on what the market was, but they said that on their earnings call today that there was one market that shut them down for a little while. And so that affected FanDuel, that affected DraftKings, that affected, Barstool. So, we had a number of, I shouldn't say that particular event affected FanDuel. FanDuel had its own separate issue going on. But, that just goes to show the widespread nature of all of this, that I'm actually having to clarify which issue stopped which sportsbook from being able to function. And with this data that we have from GeoComply, we saw that there were 3 times as many people in the U.S. attempting to make online sports betting transactions during the Super Bowl than there were last year. So, the demand was obviously through the roof.
Yeah, here in Nevada, as you mentioned, it was way longer than half an hour for the folks over at MGM. And of course, they run a separate app here in Nevada than they run the rest of the country. And so apparently the rest of the country functioned fine, but the app here in Nevada, it was out about an hour leading into the game and well into the game as well. They did end up releasing a statement saying that they were aware of the technical issues and stuff like that. That was already like by halftime that they released that statement. But yeah, it was trouble for sure. I was with about two other couples, and both of the guys that were there were both trying to access that account as well, and they were unable to get in as well. And so again, the numbers were great, and the numbers we're getting coming out are great, but you do have to wonder, even for something like the Super Bowl, even a 30-minute downtime, or in this case, a 2-hour downtime, just how much that impacted, the overall handle and what this could have been. Because I'll tell you right now, Adam, you're talking about trying to hedge off of yours. I was trying to double down on Kansas City in that game, which would have been more money for these guys because I would have lost that money. But fortunately, I was unable to access my account.
What you just said, Matt, is that I was ultimately, with 3 different sportsbook apps, not able to place the hedge bet that I wanted, tried to place a cuter hedge bet that did not pay off. So I did find a way to ultimately give away more of my money in the long run. But you bring up a really good point when it comes to the customer service angle. I got a message back after I wrote to customer service for BetMGM that basically said, yeah, we're aware of the issue. The response was akin to shrug emoji, right? Like, in another market, in a Michigan or a Virginia where things are super competitive right now, you can bet your backside I would have gotten some credit in my account for what happened there. And in Nevada, it's just sort of like, sorry.
Yeah, nobody cares about us. Dustin, we talk about this all the time. Nobody cares about us. They don't care.
I mean, I could, before the game, the geolocation was failing in Oregon, or we have run on an SB Tech platform, but I was struggling for a while, and like it happened last year too. It's just frustrating when this stuff happens, right? Like you're like, and it's a whole other conversation to get into. I mean, it's like all these sportsbooks are dealing with way more traffic than you deal with on any other normal day. So you give them some slack, but at the same time, you know this is going to happen. Right. And this is we keep hearing so much about user experience, and like if you keep having people come in the door to place the maybe the one time they bet every year, and you want them to be a repeat customer, you want them to have a good experience, and you're providing, not just Nevada, Oregon, New Jersey, everywhere. Some of them are providing you with a bad experience. So you really should be preparing for this one day, which is your biggest customer acquisition day of the year, and being ready for it. Like I understand there's a lot goes into that. It's not like snap your fingers and all of a sudden you can deal with the scale, but you should, like, we're at the point where you should start, like, hopefully next year, like these scale issues, I don't know, hopefully they're not the problem, because you do lump these on top of each other, these bad user experiences, and I think it starts adding up and makes a difference.
So guys, if you're listening, we know you are, you want to listen every week to what Dustin and Adam have to say. You have 362 days. 362 days from now, there will be another Super Bowl. And so just spend the next 362 days, and whenever you think you got it fixed, fix it 20% better. And then there you have it, and everything will be good to go as we move into the Super Bowl in 2022. Dustin, we got our first Iowa numbers with remote registration coming in.
I'm not sure there's any better example of showing what remote registration versus in-person registration means for sports betting. And the fact that we're still having this debate, it will be underscored by these numbers from Iowa. So here's what we know from Iowa. January numbers came in almost $150 million in bets. That's up from about $104 million in December. Now, the difference, January 1st, Iowa opened up remote registration, where you didn't have to go to a physical sportsbook to open up an account and start betting. Before that, you have to go to a casino that's partnered with a sportsbook, get your account started, then you can start betting. That is obviously hamstrung what's happened in Iowa, and we know that. And then we see this data, which absolutely paints this exact picture. We have a bright line of remote registration versus not. We had 18 months of it, I think, in Iowa, a lot of months of it in Iowa since the law was passed, where it was said you have to start your account in person. So we get to January, when there's less to bet on. December, pretty robust in terms of there's all this college football, there's tons of NFL games, fewer football games, but way more handle, because all of a sudden people can just sit on their butts on the couch, sign up for an account, and now they're betting. That you don't have this artificial constraint, and this is absolutely not hurting the casinos. It's whoever's doing the best job marketing or has the best partner is benefiting, but this is, Iowa has lost out on however much tax revenue at this point because they did this. And now we're really just starting to see Iowa get started and what it's going to do. This is the new normal for them, and they'll start, we're not going to see just huge growth because we're getting into the months without football. But once football season opens up, we're going to, in the fall again, we're going to see a lot more betting activity in Iowa once again, because of this change in how registration takes place.
This is one of the big sticking points that Adam and I continue to talk about in Nevada, because the numbers are great, but you wonder what the numbers could actually be if they were to just kind of get with the times. And Adam, I'm sure you saw as well. I think it was either yesterday or the day before. Just then, the people at Red Rock here in town, a powerful local casino group, said that they were still against it.
Station Casinos, the locals casino group here in Las Vegas, has an outsized amount of political influence, and despite the fact that MGM, Caesars, Wynn have all gone in front of the Gaming Control Board and said that they would like to have remote registration, that has not happened. And don't think it's just a Nevada issue, because we had testimony come up in Missouri just in the last couple of weeks where Caesars went in there and pitched for in-person registration in Missouri. And we know that if you look literally across the river from Busch Stadium in St. Louis, that's where DraftKings is in East St. Louis in Illinois with Casino Queen. So, they obviously have a powerful reason, do Caesars, to ask for that, but it is still a problem that has not been remedied throughout the country.
Adam, this is a very interesting topic, just from the where we were 3 years ago to where we are now conversation going on. But we were sitting here, comes through the Twitter machine yesterday, that the NHL has a formal partnership as far as a stake in the NHL.
The NHL is kind of getting like Oprah, like you get some of our money and you get some of our money, because now they own stock in multiple sportsbooks. So the news from yesterday, as you referenced, is that the NHL is taking a small equity stake to the tune of about $500,000 in PointsBet. This news came off the Australian Stock Exchange wire, where PointsBet is headquartered. It's a natural extension when you think about it in some ways, because PointsBet has a deal with NBC. NBC is partnered with the NHL, at least for another year plus. And so you can sort of synergize the content among the three of them there, right? When you talk about getting PointsBet content integrated into NHL broadcasts on NBC. Makes perfect sense. Now also, NHL Enterprises, the marketing arm of the NHL, we know from reports last year around the DraftKings initial offering that they have a pretty significant stake in DraftKings as well. So the NHL is getting itself deeper entwined in gambling, and they at the same time are becoming less forthcoming with information. We saw this year in particular that coaches in the NHL are not releasing information about which of their goaltenders will start any given game until 5-10 minutes before the game. And Matt, that's reminiscent of what we used to deal with the NBA, where you didn't know who was going to go till right before the game. So that's key information for bettors. So as the NHL gets itself deeper entwined in betting on the business side, I think it needs to be a little bit more cognizant of what that means in terms of perception when it comes to folks thinking that they are hiding information for their own benefit.
Yeah, and this is coming off the heels as well of the news that NBC is going to be shutting down the NBC Sports Network, where the NHL currently lives, and they're going to go the more Turner model, where Turner doesn't have their own sports network. They understand that they have a pretty big reach with TNT. It's in 90 million plus homes. And so with that, they're like, yeah, we'll just put our NBA product on TNT. It has become wildly popular. People do go seek it out. And I think that's what they're going with that strategy as well. They're going to put the games on USA Network. USA Network has about the same reach as TNT does. And NBC Sports Network, mainly, they were just having trouble populating that channel, right? Because there was just not a lot they don't own the rights to a lot of different sporting events, whereas an ESPN can easily populate a 24/7 sports channel. No problem with that whatsoever. NBC was kind of just filling it with, poker reruns,
car shows,
and things like that.
Car
and,
shows.
Just like car shows and things that they could just buy on the cheap to kind of eat up those hours. And they decided, hey, we'll go the Turner route. We'll put this stuff on USA. And honestly, Dustin, I think that's probably a pretty smart way to kind of go about all this. Again, USA is in about 90 million homes, is in about the same amount of homes as a TNT. And if people really want to watch their hockey, as we figured out with this NBA situation with TNT, they'll seek it out on USA.
Yeah, absolutely. They'll find it. The other part of this is whether the NHL as a betting product. I mean, this deal is hinged on, finding the NHL seeing PointsBet as a partner. It makes sense. I think we've seen around the country that hockey is definitely not as interesting of a betting product, at least to Americans so far. It is far down the list. Usually, it is I think we all know, the three of us, that other than the money line, like it's there's not a ton of stuff to bet on. It's betting in game, maybe the odds. The prop markets are not great or not that compelling. It's just it is definitely just become a niche part of the sports betting ecosystem. That doesn't mean there's not room for it to grow like everything else, but all of this speaks to that. And as I this one's ingrained into my memory, is Gary Bettman circa 2.5 years ago saying that hockey doesn't really lend itself to gambling like other sports. That's true, but the NHL also sees money and ways to make money, and is looking at these equity stakes as ways to do that. And if they can help grow interest in NHL betting and interest in the NHL at the same time, then they do that.
Yeah, and Adam, I think that's a very, I think that's a very real statement. You and I know as well as anyone, hockey really does. It does not lend itself to betting near as much as really any of the sports out there, and that includes even golf and UFC and all kinds of stuff. It's just there's very limited options, and it's also when you like Dustin kind of alluded to, when you get into the prop markets, unless you are a very intimate follower of the NHL, it's pretty tough to kind of get in there and start messing around with that stuff as well. Whereas the NBA, I mean, it's very simple. How many points is LeBron James going to score? I mean, you understand that's very so. How many rebounds is player X going to get? You understand that very easily. How many points is a guy going to score in the NHL? Some people don't even know how points are scored in the NHL and stuff. And so, look, at the end of the day, do I think that this is better than nothing for the NHL? Sure. And all of that. But I mean, I'm not as bullish on stuff like this helping a sport like hockey than I am basically every other sport on the planet. Like, I mean, I think it's going to certainly help golf a ton. I think the UFC has a lot of room to catch up with all this. I think tennis betting, certainly for the tournaments, the bigger tournaments that take place here in the States, is probably going to take off a little bit with this, obviously this Sinclair / Bally's deal and all of that, considering they own the Tennis Channel and all. So I think there's tons of that for these other sports. Hockey,
there are two things that are working against hockey when it comes to betting on the sport. One is that it is probably the least stat driven of the 4 major sports leagues, right? You have goals, you have assists, you have saves, you have shots. That's pretty much it, right? There's not a lot more than that when it comes to traditional hockey stats that people are used to. The second thing they have working against them is game flow, because it is not a game that has golf or baseball's built-in pauses that give you more opportunities to find an in-game market. You think about how hard it is to get in-game bets in on certain sports, and then try to think about hockey, where sometimes when you look down or go to get a drink from the kitchen, you missed a goal. So that makes it much more difficult. But I think it's also why hockey has been so aggressive with its puck tracking technology that it started to put into play this year. Had to yank it because there were some issues actually with the quality of the puck. But they're going for sort of that next spectrum of statistics that are going to include shot velocity and skate velocity and so on like that I think they're looking toward creating some new betting markets with that. It's just not something that's coming immediately.
Dustin, we have a couple of data providers, and we have some interesting news about a couple of data providers.
Yeah, this is pretty inside baseball or inside soccer or football, as you will. But but covering the inside nuts and bolts of what's going on. So this is there is constantly bickering between the two biggest and really two only data providers in the global sports betting market: Genius Sports and Sportradar. The backstory is Sportradar was suing for access so that it could provide stat tracking and data tracking on English Premier League, Scottish football as well. What happened this week was that Genius Sports actually came and countersued because they have a deal with these leagues to provide data, and Sportradar allegedly sends data scouts. I don't think even allegedly is known. They are known to send data scouts. And this is all a big row about the protection of data and who owns it and who is allowed to provide it, both for just general media purposes and for betting purposes. So the story is, maybe we don't care across this side of the pond, but it's going this way. At some point, there's going to be, we know the leagues really highly value their data and put an emphasis on that. These two companies are providing the data for the major leagues in the United States. Is there going to be at some point, what's going to happen in the United States with all of this? That's the interesting part that comes out of is, will there be lawsuits in the United States? I don't know, but there are similar dynamics as to what's going on in the UK, and this data stuff. We're still in the early days of it here in the United States, but we know the NFL and all the other leagues just highly value this and are pushing. They push legislation and they push all sorts of things around this data. So it's a continuing developing storyline that will follow here in the US as well.
Adam, the Texas lieutenant governor says things. He says a lot of things, and he says things in a definitive fashion. It seems like a lot of times, even though his opinion might not necessarily be the end all be all to certain conversations and things. And he has gone ahead and made his opinion known, although it sounds like he's saying something a little bit more than that when it comes to sports betting, all these rumors that we keep hearing about
Let's
Texas.
Clear something up here first. It's not that Dan Patrick when I start talking about this, okay? We're talking about Dan Patrick, the lieutenant governor of Texas, not the Dan Patrick who used to be en fuego. This is the Texas lieutenant governor coming out in an interview this week and saying that sports betting legislation in the state is, quote, not going to see the light of day this session, end quote. Pretty big proclamation from a guy who actually doesn't really have the ability to choose whether that makes it to the floor or not. I mean, the most effect he might
Right.
be able to have is, as a tie-breaking vote in the Senate. But this is something that we heard probably about a month ago through our Brad Allen, who had the first story out there about this, talking about that sports teams, including Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, Mark Cuban and the Mavericks, wanted to push legislation to legalize sports betting in Texas and operate it through the teams. And we've seen some rumors of legislation that's going to be coming through that would involve some licensure for not only the teams, but maybe some other entities as well. Now, it's not easy in Texas. First of all, you're trying to find political will to change something in the Constitution, which means you're looking at a constitutional amendment, which of course always makes things more complicated in the first place. But what Patrick was saying is that he doesn't believe the votes are there. Now, who knows? That might be the case. That might not be the case. Matt, you made a good point to me about this recently, talking about it, that I'll let you elaborate on in a minute. But when it comes to, does this legislation get signed, this could be the sort of thing where Dan Patrick is taking the bullet for Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, and maybe kind of getting out front and saying, even if you pass this, I can't guarantee you it's going to get through.
Yeah, Dustin, Adam, and I were having a conversation yesterday about this, and I was just saying, the point where he was saying that they didn't have the votes. I mean, we are talking billionaires here that want this done, and I don't know if you know what they do with that money, but they buy political influence through their donations and what they want to do. So for him to say they don't have the votes was just kind of laughable to me, where I'm like, if Mark Cuban and Jerry Jones and Tillman Fertitta want to get together and make sure that they have the votes to get sports betting done in Texas, I would bet a large amount of money, which we are not legally allowed to do here in the United States, on that actually happening. I just found it kind of funny when he decided that he was saying, "Oh yeah, they don't have the votes to get it done."
And it's not even just the money. These are big names, right? Representatives in Texas. So you're probably, if you're getting a call or see that Jerry Jones or Mark Cuban wants something, that turns your head too, right? I would agree. There's, they can leverage this to, that they have to have the votes on the legislative front if they really, really want them. There's not the concerns of the casino. Every other state we deal with, there's either tribal casinos or commercial casinos. That really isn't in play here, other than Sands trying to get a casino in Texas in parallel with all of this. But yeah, I agree. We're reading tea leaves a lot of times, and I think Adam's tea leaf reading here is probably correct in terms of what this messaging means. And yeah, who knows? We're sitting here guessing. There's obviously a lot of big names behind Texas sports betting. Whether that means it gets to the finish line, God only knows. Right now, the LSR Sportsbook, I do not think, is taking bets on Texas right now, unless
the only thing we're taking bets on is will anyone streak during March Madness?
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a story for a different day. And by the way, if that has popped up in your feed, that didn't happen. Just so everyone knows that story is fake. Just so that everyone. Dustin, let's talk about Wynn. And this was we hadn't talked a ton about Wynn here over the last couple of years, actually, but they are, Wynn Interactive is going in with WynnBet, and they are getting, applications in other states, going live in other states, and have continued to say that they want to be a player in this market here. So we did get a Wynn earnings call.
By DraftKings? Oh, wrong prompt. We're talking about a different gambling company. If you're not a gambling company and pitching sports betting as part of your growth plan, are you even trying these days? So that's what we got from Wynn when their fourth quarter earnings. They are putting sports betting out there as their growth segment. They have put definitely more resources into WynnBet. They have market access closing in on 10 states now, I believe. So they are pushing this as something that they're counting on in 2021 and beyond to be a growth driver for them. Now, will that happen? I don't know. We've talked I think before on this podcast. I don't know if Wynn has the will to become a top tier or even a top 2 tier, a second tier operator. It takes that, the price of that we know takes a lot of money and a lot of will. Now they have at least the infrastructure, they have the market access. Will the Wynn brand outside of the states where there's a Wynn casino in Massachusetts and obviously a big brand in Nevada, does that become something that is that they can push and really bank on? I don't know. You're going to have to spend a lot of money to get that brand awareness, to get they talk about digital marketing spend and finding ways. How can they get there? Maybe, but it takes a will of spending that is not going to create immediate returns in terms of revenue. So we'll see. It's the verdict is out, but Wynn is another one of these companies that is clearly saying we're making a big push in online gambling, and we'll see what comes of it, and buy our stock because of that.
Yeah, it was Adam, several years ago, the Wynn was a fairly big player, in the sports betting world, strictly because when there wasn't in any other state, and Johnny Avello, who's now over at DraftKings, was running that book, like they'd get a lot of action, right? I mean, people wanted to go do business with Johnny and wanted to make that sports book kind of part of their portfolio of places that they went and placed bets. But then Johnny left, and then everything kind of opened up around the country, and you really didn't hear a peep from them until real recently here. So, will that be enough? Will they have the cash? Will they want to spend the cash to get the WynnBet brand into people's skulls?
Pure speculation
I don't really know.
Coming up here, so this is not inside knowledge in any way. But when Johnny Avello was there was when Steve Wynn was also deeply involved in his namesake business. Of course, for a variety of reasons, he is not anymore. Johnny Avello, we know, is with DraftKings running all of their trading. But as this becomes more of a corporate enterprise with Wynn, I think they might look at the value proposition with getting involved in sports betting. And as Dustin said, I don't know that they become a second tier operator even, but if they can get technology that's fairly easily scalable, that doesn't cost them a lot, they have a brand that doesn't really require them to do a lot of advertising, right? The Wynn brand is well known. Now, they're going to have product that can compete, but at the same time, I think that the lift is a lot less for them in terms of brand awareness than it is for some newer operators.
Dustin, and while we're speculating here, we'll go off script just for a second, but their friends across the street over there at Sands Corp, there was rumors that came out this past week that maybe they were kicking the tires, because we were saying that if they were going to get involved, it was likely going to be through acquisition, not them trying to just organically create, SandsBet or something like that, or whatever, that they would just go out and acquire something. Apparently they were kicking the tires with 888. At least that's the rumor going around out there.
Yeah, and we did not report it. I can say I had heard that rumor too. There are lots of reasons to make that connection between. Don't get into it too much, but Israel is a connection there that makes make a little sense between the two companies and their ethos. But I agree. I mean, if Sands is going to get in, I think it's pretty obvious they have to acquire something. They're not going to build something from scratch and become a sports betting powerhouse. There's just no way. This is a company that has fought tooth and nail in some ways to stop online betting from happening. So if they're going to get serious and they're coming in and at a deficit, you're not going to sit here, spend a lot of money on building a brand. You want something ready made, and they are obviously a company that can. That has the cash or what have you to make that happen. So if they are indeed serious, it sounds, if they want to get into these big states and have access and, do something, they're going to acquire something and do that. So it's whether you believe that will exist again for a very large gambling company to finally take the plunge on online gambling. And at the end of the day, this is all good. All right. I think legacy casino companies getting in and saying, this is the future. This is what moves us forward in the United States, right? If we I always take it a little bit to online casino and poker because I focus on that too. But that's everybody just really needs to realize that this is the future. I think the pandemic really emphasized that in a lot of ways, that this is a way for casinos to not be so reliant on just the land-based revenues, and seeing companies getting more serious, testing waters on the online betting. It should be good for the industry overall.
And Adam, to put a bow on this, I mean, good, bad, or otherwise, from a product standpoint or from whatever they're bringing to the table here, we've always said this. I mean, more competition is better for not only innovation within the space, but for the consumer as well and everything. So, like Dustin said, I mean, Wynn getting in and trying to say this is the future, if Sands wants to get in and acquire an 888 and actually try to really blow them up in the States where really they've kind of sat back dormant and stuff like that. Again, for for us as bettors, or people at least that are in those states where they will be available and stuff like that. This is definitely all a good thing.
One is in terms of what we see right now in terms of the massive spend on marketing and the free bets and match bets and promos that are out there for customers in certain states right now. It's available in states that are competitive, that have open marketplaces, that are trying to get in customers as quickly as possible because they've been pretty sticky in the U.S. market thus far in terms of staying with the sportsbook they go in with. The second thing is what you just mentioned. Product innovation is something that is severely lacking in this market overall. It's something that gave FanDuel and DraftKings a huge edge getting started because they had already invested so much in their DFS apps that they were ready to scale up when it came to sports betting. They were there for it. And there are a lot of companies right now that are offering an inferior product and trying to get by on whether it's legacy, whether it's on brand or reputation or player database, that I think in the long run are going to wish they had spent a little bit more, and it's this type of competition that probably will drive them to.
Absolutely. So anyway, again, I no matter what comes, I mean, whether they're whatever, no matter what they put out, I think it's just good for there to be people pushing each other within this industry, and hopefully people don't get complacent through all of this. Adam, take us home with some final states news here.
I would be happy to do that for you. So the newest of the news is a bill filed in Georgia where it's looking more and more likely that something's going to get done. There are a lot of similarities between Georgia and Arizona, two states that we're going to talk about here in this update. Georgia, we saw a bill filed in the Senate that is fairly similar to the House bill. The big difference in the bills being that one bans all college betting. The new one would ban just in-state college betting. A ban on all college betting in SEC country, Mr. Brown, as you know, would probably not be the wisest way to launch a sports betting market. No. So we'll see what happens there, but the pro teams are lined up in support of it in Georgia, and that's going to go a long way to getting something done. I can tell you from some conversations I've had with some folks behind the scenes there that there is political will there. It might not be quite out on the surface like it is in some places, but Georgia is becoming more likely to pass this year. Arizona, what we just talked about, had some hearings this week. Governor Doug Ducey had to renegotiate the compacts with the tribes. They were coming up on their expiration. And tribal gaming is, of course, the primary interest in Arizona when it comes to casinos. And it seems that there might be some room for compromise there in terms of allowing the tribes a certain amount of licenses and some other entities in the state licensure as well. Could include the pro sports teams in Arizona, could include the Cardinals, the Diamondbacks, etc., who might be able to get in on a partnership deal like we see in Virginia with the Washington football team and FanDuel. Again, like Georgia, conservative state, tried last year, didn't really get much traction, but seems to have a much better coordinated effort going on this year. The one other state that I thought was worth updating was Mississippi. God bless you, Mississippi. Mississippi Mobile gets to live for another year, and that's not necessarily a good thing. Mississippi was one of the first markets to launch sports betting. They have tried every year since they launched, right after PASPA. They have put in a bill to try to legalize mobile sports betting, and none of those bills have ever managed to get out of committee. So the idea of Mississippi Mobile, on-premise mobile, which is the only legal kind in Mississippi, which none of the commercial casinos uses, lives on for at least one more year.
Yeah, I'm glad you put that. I'm glad you said that because I was going to add to that. I was like, I've been down there to all these casinos and none of them care about it at all. Like there is not even one advertisement for downloading an app anywhere in those casinos because again, it's not worth them putting the time and effort into it to have to try to geofence just around the property and stuff. So yeah, it's nothing anybody's interested in. So until they get full mobile, it will just basically be as if they only have over the counter stuff going on there in Mississippi. Guys, as always, you can read about these stories in full at LegalSportsReport.com. Please go over there and check out all the great work Adam and his team have going on at LSR. You can follow us on the Twitter machine at Adam Candee, 2 E's, no Y, at Dustin Gouker. And if you really
right there, Mr. Brown. I have to ask you one quick question before we get out of here. I have listened to some of your other work on podcasts throughout our network of sites, and this is the only podcast where you give that admonishment. You willingly bring people in to your Twitter account on some of your other videos. Why is it here that you have to hate yourself?
I mean, here's the thing. People come here for y'all's great takes on all of the stuff that has to do with the business aspect of all of this. And they don't want to hear me talk about that. I loved seeing Tom Brady being incredibly drunk today on a boat and celebrating his win. They don't need that in their lives, which I do. I love that. I'm glad Tom Brady's human. Like everyone's making a big deal about the guy actually being human and stuff. So they don't want those takes. They want the stuff that helps them along with their business and makes them understand this industry better. And if anything, I would just confuse them. Yeah, that's kind of the way.
Matt's a good follow. Follow Matt.
Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, all the places that you get your podcast. Please go ahead and subscribe, rate, and review. Again, every time we post something, it will just go right to your feed. So that is the best way to go ahead and get this thing as soon as it hits. For Adam, for Dustin, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.